the episode number 92. It's obviously been a while since my mouth has made those noises. Welcome to the U2 podcast. Episode number 92 is actually what I should be saying, where we talk all things U2, album news, tour dates, and also birth dates of album news, releases of sorts. So I'm joined by, hopefully if all the widgets and gadgets are working and you're hearing this all right, I'm joined by three folks on the panel today. I've got Aaron Govern. Welcome, Aaron.
Hello.
Hello. He'll be the deep voice that you hear from across the pond. I've also got Becky Myers. Welcome back, Becky.
Hey, y'all.
She'll be the one with the accent that you'll hear. But more of an accent. I guess I shouldn't say that.
Sort of.
Everybody has an accent. I just don't think I do. And Christopher, welcome back.
Hello, hello.
Fellow Chris. So hopefully you guys can keep us separated with the same name as you're listening to the podcast. So how are you guys doing? It's been a while since we had the podcast. First of all, I guess any fun U2 related things besides the album that we're going to be discussing in your life since last we talked? Well, anybody can jump in there.
Well,
no, just coasting.
Coasting.
Waiting.
Nice time.
Do you know what? I think it's great just to have some downtime from U2, from the live shows and everything. I've got to be honest with you, both financially and socially. It's a nice time to reflect on the last few years, which have been very, very busy.
I feel the same way. With my work, with my music analysis research and everything, I've gotten a chance to start new projects and explore new music besides U2. And yes, there is music outside U2, and and there's a lot of it, and it's really, really, and some of it's really, really good. So it's
there
nice
is.
Yeah, imagine that. But have no fear, U2 fans, because this project does also incorporate U2's music, because I can't not incorporate U2's music into my research.
It's in your DNA.
Exactly.
And of course, now there's talk of them playing Down Under. So
yeah,
we'll see where that goes.
Yeah. So if you've been living under, or not under, or down under rock, I guess, or whatever the analogy is there, but there's rumors and stuff about U2 taking the Joshua Tree tour, maybe down under, or something happening anyways. Yep. Australia area later this year, right? Yeah, 2019.
Yes.
It feels like we're going back to 2017 with Joshua Tree tour, but discussions. But that's the rumor, anyways. Obviously, don't book flights or anything until you know for sure. And, and even as obviously nothing's set in stone until tickets are announced and anything like that. So, but it's exciting times for sure. I know there's a large contingent of awesome U2 fans in that side of the world who are desperate for a little U2 action, whatever form it may take, whether it's a Joshua Tree tour or otherwise. I'm sure they'll be happy to receive them over there. And also the other thing, I know many folks were tweeting about this, but the U2.com account downloads are starting to show up from the subscriber benefits.
I didn't notice until earlier this afternoon because I had an email come through from U2.com, but on reflection, looking at the website, it seemed to have been posted presumably sometime yesterday. But they're available and they sound brilliant.
They do sound really good.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So
even though one of the version, I mean, the live version of Little Things is not my favorite. I'm heavily enamored with the studio version, so it's a little too poppy for me. But I do like getting new versions of things. So it is nice to have another live track in the collection.
Yep. Yeah, I love that song, so I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Little Things and Song for Someone from back in 2015 were released.
Yes.
So going way back into the archives now, it's already 4 years old, almost, I guess.
Isn't that weird? Like, oddly enough, I've written about both of those.
Nice.
Yeah. I did a song about Song for Someone, and then when we did the wrap up, I think I wrote about Little Things, and crazy. Yeah. Isn't that fun? I love it.
And if you haven't visited at U2.com, which obviously this podcast is affiliated with and part of that crew, at U2.com has a new website. This is actually, I think we talked about it last episode when Matt and I did a 2018 year in recap or whatever. But just in case you hadn't checked it out lately, at U2.com has a new website that you can visit and peruse and make sure it looks okay in whatever weird browser you might happen to use in whatever part of the world you're in. So let us know if there's any issues with viewing things, but everything should be running smoothly by now, hopefully, and you can check out what's going on in there. In the meantime, lots of stuff, lots of our back catalog, I guess, is very vast, rich, and worth exploring if you've never gone back into the histories of the various articles and things that have been written on there. So all the folks who I think even I have a couple words on the site, but I was going to say all the folks who've been on the podcast anyways have articles in various forums on at youtube.com. So very much worth checking out in this YouTube downtime. So, but the reason we're here to talk about to back on the podcast today anyways for sure is to talk about the 10-year anniversary of a little album called No Line on the Horizon. So we did a song-by-song review of the album back in episode 49 of the podcast, so we're not going to necessarily do that, although obviously my fellow panelists are more than welcome to go deep and long on a song if they're so inclined. But that one you can find goodstuff.fm/ATU2/49 to listen to that. I don't know where any of you, I think Aaron was on that one. I forgot to check who else was on that episode.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, Elizabeth, Sharon.
What was that? Episode 49. Crikey, that's a few podcasts back, isn't it?
That's back in 2017.
I remember that one. It's very good. Yeah.
We'll eventually start doing reviews of our podcast reviews. We'll just sort of circle in on ourselves, but
how very meta.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I guess going from what I see, anyways, Christopher. In sort of the circle here that I'm looking at, I don't know what folks out there are seeing in order, but Christopher, any sort of thoughts of that? What I posed to the At U2 staff, anyways, for being on this, and we'll have some audio clips from a few folks as well who sent in clips who couldn't be here. Just kind of like what your impressions were of the album when it came out, and then also more importantly, relevant to this discussion is how do you think it stands up now, 10 years on, at its 10th birthday? Enters almost a preteen era. Where does No Line on the Horizon sit for you, Christopher?
It's such an interesting album for me personally. This album came out in 2009, and that's when my then girlfriend, who is now my wife and mother of my 3 wonderful and handful of children, that's when we got together. So we fell in love with each other as No Line on the Horizon. As we got familiar with No Line on the Horizon. So we think of this album as it kind of mirrors our relationship. She was first introduced to the U2 fandom through No Line on the Horizon. She followed U2 as on the radio and with the hits, but No Line was the first album that she really got to know through me because I had started working with at U2 and I just finished my U2 dissertation and all that stuff. And so she was like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And so I was like, "Well, this is U2 fandom, I think." And I had no idea what it really was until I actually joined at U2 2 years later. So this album, it means a whole lot to me personally, not just musically and music theoretically.
And so she's stayed. Obviously, she stayed your wife, but she stayed a U2
yes,
fan
thankfully.
to this day as well.
Yeah. Yes, she has. I have not scared her off. Not yet.
That's good to see. How about you, Aaron? What do you recall? Obviously, No Line wasn't your first U2 album or first U2 experience.
No, not by any means. No. Well, my little background to the album is that I've always been a bit of a nerdy U2 fan, and because I have an Irish connection with my family and everybody living in Ireland, and I confessed to going over to like day trips to Hanover Quay, and in April 2008 I went over and obviously knowing the band were going to be there anyhow, and met Danny Lanois outside the studio in the morning as they were going in, and I said to him, how's the album coming on? He says, about another 3 or 4 days recording. Wow, I said, that's great. When do you think I'll be out? He said, probably August, September. So I was a little bit disappointed that a few months later it was still going on and on and on. So I thought this album will never come out. But, that's typical of U2, isn't it? I mean, there's never a straightforward recording album. They bounce tracks in and out, I think, anyhow, in terms of what went on the album eventually. And some songs have straggled over to Songs of Innocence. So that's one of my memories of it. And but the other memory really is just the excitement of having all of this collector stuff that came out with the album, because the box sets really started with this album, and I think they set the standard in terms of the releases of new albums, because we'll probably talk a little bit about it later, but it's a transitional period in music, no two ways about it, because at this point in time, really, this is where we start seeing the movement from physical releases like CDs and cassettes and vinyl, obviously long disappeared, but moving into the digital era. So I think this was a really important release for U2. They're on a new record label as well in Europe on Mercury. They'd left Ireland for this album release. So this was a new venture for them. And I think they succeeded in terms of the way they promoted this album, much more so than they did probably with Songs of Innocence, but that's another story.
Oops.
So that's my memory of it in particular, and of course the album is, in my opinion, it's pretty much my favorite album. I have to be honest with you. I always say Achtung Baby, but when push comes to shove, I think No Line is the one that I listen to probably more than any other U2 album. No two ways.
Wow. Nice.
Whoa.
Okay.
Yeah, and obviously when I put out the call for coming on a podcast to talk about No Line on the Horizon, it's not like people who aren't fans of the podcast jump or fans of the album jump at the opportunity to come on. So we're a little bit biased in terms of, obviously all four of us I think are fans of the album, and so you won't hear a lot of trash talking, I don't think, of songs and stuff in this album, but it's still in this podcast. But it still is interesting to hear that it is like one of your, if not the most played album of their catalog. Because it definitely, like for me, it has the impression I get anyways is because it wasn't super popular with the non-U2 fans in my life, I feel like it is sort of like not a lower quality, but definitely a lower popularity in terms of the album itself and what people remember of it. And obviously just like, the Get on the Boots kind of sound, and that's where it stopped for a lot of people. But how about you, Becky? What's your recollection of it?
Well, personally, when this album came out, I couldn't wait for it, probably like most U2 fans, but it happened to be the time that I was going through some very intense personal turmoil in my marriage. And so I had lost myself in this album and refound myself partly. But also, I think this album is highly, highly underappreciated. And I think I get it from a pop sense why it didn't chart really dramatically, and I think they made some mistakes in terms of a few things, like releasing Boots as their first single, which I will say that's probably one of my least favorite songs on the album. I like the lyrics, but I don't like how it's presented in the music personally, some of it. But overall I think it's just a solid album in terms of the stories and the characters, and the guitar playing for me is, gosh, the Edge just kills it on here. The rhythm section, they're just so good musically on it. And Chris, you can definitely talk to it much more, should we say, academically than I can. I can just say I love it. And like the Edge's solos, good Lord. And Larry just beating the heck out of the drums. But I think in a good way. And I think it's vastly underappreciated. I think it's one of my favorite albums in their entire catalog. I will have to say there's a couple others, like Achtung Baby's up there for me as well, Aaron. But I think it's underappreciated. And I'm hoping that today more people see the value in it and the artistry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if nothing else, I hope through even just this podcast, if you haven't, whatever method you're listening to music, spin up the record or put it in Spotify or wherever you happen to listen to music, throw the album on again and just like relive it a bit. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised at how good it is, even if you maybe stopped listening after the tour was done, let's say, or whatever reason, maybe you put it away.
Yeah.
I know some listeners sent tweets in, and I'll try and throw them in as we talk, but Sir Edward Gray said, maybe a little controversial, but he said, let's face it, this is the last time the Edge was seriously on fire. There are plenty of great guitar solos and sounds on this record. If I could only have one, give me Risk over Relevance. No Line is a beauty. 10 years on. How about you? Risk over Relevance. So, which I think that's where kind of what Becky's getting at too, is like obviously great guitar stuff from Edge. I would debate too whether this is the last time he's been on fire, but that aside, I think it was a bit of a risk they took with it, and and you can debate whether it's risk because they are averse to just like settling on a direction and keep switching producers and have to kind of by default take risks that way, or what the reasoning was. But
Well, for me, there's a number of things about the album. I mean, it certainly has some very unique edge guitar on it. Certainly things like Moment of Surrender. You know, he's got a very almost like a David Gilmour sound on the guitar, which he's never tried before. So there's lots of experimental type stuff there from Edge, which is really unique. Yeah, there's a lot of different styles on the album. I mean, Boots is a very, very fast song. Beats per minute, I don't know what it is. It's probably around 160. It's almost too fast, which is probably why it didn't come across as in the way that the other calling card singles like Beautiful Day and Vertigo, which again are quite fast songs, but nowhere near as fast as Boots.
I heard Boots as Vertigo Part 2. You know, like the texture is very similar, and I think that's part of the reason why Boots didn't do as well is because it sounds like almost like a Vertigo sequel.
It did.
A lot of fans said, "Wait, we've heard this before," and yes, of course, U2 has a style, obviously, and so, but you know, they sound really, really similar structurally, texturally, and maybe for some fans it was either too close to it or they were expecting something vastly different. Which, Becky, I agree with you. I don't think Boots as the first single got the album off on the right foot. I mean, Breathe or Magnificent would have been.
To be fair, the band themselves have acknowledged that now. I think Edge was the one who really promoted Boots as being the lead single, and they've acknowledged that.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, there's a few comments I'll just throw in here from @Amrice78 said if Get on Your Boots wasn't the first single of the album would be considered greater as a whole. Moment of Surrender is a masterpiece. Breathe, magnificent stand-up comedy, and Cedars of Lebanon are stellar. Where was the other one here? Still remember, @Nate Scoggins says, still remember buying Get on Your Boots at midnight, so maybe the single when it came out, I guess pre-release single before the album. And freaking out about that breakdown in the middle section. Still the best, only good part of that song.
That is a good part. That's a really good part.
And it was going the other way, I guess. @Buzz1Daddy said, I still see nothing wrong with liking Boots. However, my favorite track off this record has always been Cedars of Lebanon. Wish the 360 shows had ended with this. Actually, remember hearing this on satellite radio at work back in 2010. So, yeah, it's one of those divisive songs. Sorry, go ahead, Aaron.
Sorry, one thing I'll say about Boots, live, it was fantastic. No two ways about it. Much better than record.
You know, I think this album as a whole, live, did well on stage. And I lament the fact that the band it seemed like the band gave up on the album because as we might talk about later, the 360 tour turned from a No Line promo tour to an Achtung Baby reunion tour, as it were, right? Like a reminiscence tour, or maybe they were using 360 to get ready for Glastonbury, you know, where they played a heavily Achtung Baby set. So, but you know, I thought a lot of the tracks from No Line were really good live. I mean, I thought Breathe was a great show opener, and Magnificent to this day. I love that song. I mean, it's modern U2 with classic touches. I mean, you can't go wrong with it. I think so. I wish they gave that album a fairer shake live.
I think part of the issue there, was the timing of the tour, and that Glastonbury had to be delayed by a year, wasn't it? So I think because they were out there so long, it was an evolution of the tour in a sense. I might be wrong, but remember they came back to North America. Am I right about that?
Yeah, they did in 2011. Yep.
Yeah, that's where we met.
Yep. Exactly.
No, we were in the stadium. We didn't meet. I met Jill. But that's the year all three of us came onto staff, I think. Right, Aaron?
Yeah,
2011?
Around 2010. Yeah.
It's our class, yeah. So, but I do think, anyway, go ahead.
Perhaps the Bono back injury in 2010 didn't help really with because it stopped and started, didn't the tour? So there was a little
I think that was part of it with the timing.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, it comes down to Bono in some way or another.
Much to Larry's chagrin, I'm sure.
Exactly. @Brian Anonymous said, here are my thoughts. Let's convince U2 to play an acoustic White as Snow in an intimate MTV Unplugged-esque setting with keyboard's best unsung track on the album. Which
Oh.
That
I
would be
think we
really
could
good.
have a collection of songs that would be unbelievably good in that setting.
Oh yeah.
But White as Snow.
It's interesting, Aaron, that you brought up the idea of it being recorded in Ireland at Hanover, and because I mean the imagery and the sort of vibe they wanted to present, even though obviously they did record it in a few different places, is the Moroccan kind of like, that's where we got this inspiration, and that's what the album is. And it's not, I don't associate it with being an Irish record as much. I mean, obviously the band is Irish.
Right.
I'm not disputing that, but just in terms of my visual sort of what I associate with it is like and they have the sounds and stuff of Morocco on it, and it's kind of much more that vibe as opposed to the sort of gritty, dirty Ireland. No offense to Ireland.
Yeah, no, I understand. I think there's only a few tracks really ultimately that made it from Morocco, and Nkola was the obvious one that came through. But I mean, the one of the reasons they went to Morocco in any case really was because of the Eno and Lamar collaboration. And we forget actually that this is actually not just really U2. There's Eno and Lamar on 7 of the 11 tracks as co-writers, even writing lyrics, let alone producing whatever. So this is a big contribution. We've got Terry Lawless on the album as well, the U2 Underworld keyboardist also involved. So there's quite a lot of different things going on. And obviously with Eno is producer on the album, but he's only really involved in the Morocco part. He wasn't involved in Dublin at all. So the parts that they recorded in the early part of 2008 were really just a few weeks in Morocco. So the vast majority is in HQ in Dublin, as you're aware. But I think Steve Lillywhite got a little bit in trouble with Paul McGuinness and the record label at the time, because he said that they didn't get the African Moroccan sound that they were hoping to get. But I don't know, there's quite a few tracks on there which sound so different. That's particularly Fez Being Born. They do have a certain more Eastern feel about them, I think, than African feel than anything else they've done in their repertoire.
Agreed.
Yeah,
totally.
Definitely. And also I was rereading the credits in the book and the interviews that Catherine Owens did with them. She was the designer for the box set, I guess the lead design, not designer, but she coordinated the whole effort. And The Edge apparently worked with Rick Rubin early on. So there was some of that influence in this album too. I totally forgot about that, but I'm not sure how much of that came through. But Larry does his loops and sends them off, and then The Edge works. He was in Malibu for a lot of this before the band did actually get into the recording sessions. So he brought that in, and I'm not sure. Maybe Chris, you can answer this better, like how much of that survived or his influence. But before it got to Eno and Lanois. So
interesting. So you two had a history of working with Rubin well before Songs of Innocence.
Yes, at least
because I remember a lot of the hype leading up to the release of Songs of Innocence was
they worked with
Rubin, and then but that was 5 or 6 years before. So
I think they worked with Rubin, didn't they, in 2006 for the 18 singles? They did the Green Day project.
That makes
sense.
That's
right.
So they
the Green Day thing. That's where it was. It was for
that makes
when they worked with Billy Joe Armstrong, when they worked with Green Day for the
Saints.
That was it.
Nice as well. And the intention was to work with Rubin on this album, on No Line on the Horizon. And Rubin has a very, very different work production technique. He visits what you're doing and makes some suggestions. I don't think that was going to work with U2 in any case. They need somebody to really haul them over the line. Rubin's
right. I was going to say beat them into submission, but that's not quite right.
Taskmaster. They need cracking the whip.
I think if Rubin was still involved, the album wouldn't have been out yet. So they abandoned Rubin, basically.
Yeah, there's a quote from Adam at least on the Wikipedia page about Rubin saying, "Once we have a song, we're interested in the atmospherics and the tones and the overdubs and the different stuff you can do with it, things that Rick was not in the slightest bit interested in. He was interested in getting it from embryonic stage to a song that could be mixed and put on a record." So probably, actually, it might have been the other way, Christopher, where it might have been quicker if they had actually listen to him and just, he didn't want to do the overdubs and adding
Oh,
extra
yeah.
stuff, right? Which you can see, like, I could see in 20 years or whatever the number is when, let's say, God forbid, but obviously at some point somebody is going to not be around anymore in the band, and Bono's by himself and needs to resurrect his career or something, a la Johnny Cash, and Rick Rubin's happens to walk by and they
Lord.
record some amazing album
Really?
together. But we won't dwell there too long.
Don't do that, Bono. If you're listening, don't do that.
Future
Please.
Bono.
Yeah, please don't do that.
Future Bono. That's this Bono telling future Bono.
I've always maintained that there's a good acoustic album in Edge and Bono together somehow. Not like deliberate, not like a copy of the Johnny Cash stuff, obviously, but just something in there where they could have a lot of fun. But I don't think that's coming anytime soon. So, Adam's Kimono actually on Twitter said the favorite No Line on the Horizon
Hey, Adam's Kimono, love you.
track is Breathe. There's 3 things I need you to know: Kimono, Kimono, Kimono. So,
I'm with you.
yeah,
I'm with
Yep.
you.
yeah, it's definitely a great track. So, but yeah, it is interesting how those things, like the way that, the randomness sort of approaching Rick Rubin, it not working out, that delays them recording a bit longer. So then maybe Lanois and Eno are available because maybe they weren't before. Now they are, let's say. I don't know how specific this stuff is, but then, and even Lily White too, to be able to be involved in stuff, whereas maybe he was with Dave Matthews Band up to that point or whatever. And so I guess in light of that, Christopher, even as you approach it, music theory wise, musically, what kind of things are you drawing out of the album, and whether it's specific songs you want to touch on or just an overall vibe of how they recorded it?
Yeah, well, this I've been thinking about this actually for a long time, probably since shortly after the album came out, and the album wasn't received as universally as lots of the other albums in their catalog, and there are excellent tracks there. So I always wonder why it didn't land. And for me, the track order, I think maybe if the tracks were organized differently, maybe the album would have done better. So they made a big deal about first being in Morocco. So why not lead with Fez being born? That introduces the entire aesthetic of the album, and it would function kind of like Love Is All We Have Left on Songs of Experience, right? It's this one track that sounds different from anything else, but it serves as an introductory track. And then you go from Fez to No Line on the Horizon, and I've actually worked with I've actually played with this in some sound editing software. And if U2 had treated No Line more like a concept album, and if they eliminated the silence or the breaks between tracks and just had, one track bleed into the next. So you start with Fez, and then you go into No Line on the Horizon, and then Boots, and then White as Snow is a little come down, and then you start building it up again, and you have I'll Go Crazy, and then Moment of Surrender it's a climax, but because it's so soft, it functions kind of like a paradoxical climax, and then you really establish momentum for the end of the album after Moment of Surrender with Stand Up Comedy, Breathe, Magnificent, those 3 rockers all in a row.
Yeah.
And then
cool.
And then you kind of come down for the signature signature slow ending of a U2 album with Unknown Caller and Cedars of Lebanon. I think that track order might have, or a different track order, that one being one example of them, might have helped the album be I don't know, it feels in the new running order, it feels more cohesive. In the original running order, it feels a little disjointed to me. So but that's just me. So
I think that's a good shout you there with the reorder. I'm going to be up all night now, don't you? Doing my own version of the CD. So thanks very much.
Well, I was going to say, if you I don't know if you do Spotify or Apple Music or whatever, but even just like putting out a playlist or a reorder, Christopher's reordered No Line, a new line. You know what?
I will make an Apple Music playlist and I will tweet that out, and
I'll try and throw it in the show notes.
I will title it No Line Horizon Reordered. Yeah. Totally.
I agree with Christopher. I mean, the first 4 tracks, irrespective of the order, they're just killer tracks. They're fantastic. And then I'll just look at the CD. We have I'll Go Crazy, followed by Get on Your Boots and Stand Up Comedy. And
you can hear Edge's. You can hear because Edge had just worked on It Might Get Loud. Yeah. Right. So he probably had Zeppelin on the brain when they recorded stand-up comedy, which is why it's. But that's a good old fashioned rock song, and there aren't a lot of, or there aren't any just straight up rock songs on No Line, and I think coming from Atomic Bomb, which was a rock guitar centered record, it's a nice carryover. Although you're certainly not the only one who doesn't who isn't too fond of stand-up comedy, but I happen to love it. But to each his own, right?
And that is the interesting thing, just like I was saying before, of like the sort of serendipity or randomness of people they run into as influence. We often think of, or I catch myself thinking of U2 as like this 4-person group bubble that walks around collectively and doesn't, only interacts with each other musically, and then go have supper with their family and then come back and music, But obviously things like that happen. Like there's that quote with Bono hitching a ride with somebody, and they put on Joshua Tree, and it was like there's no bass or whatever, no oomph to it, and that's where it sort of Achtung, they wanted some like deep low end stuff. And so totally you could see Edge sitting there with like Jack White, Jack White, yeah,
Jack White,
Jack White and Jimmy Page, and they were like pulling out these like intense like guttural riffs on their guitar, and Edge is like, here's Streets, and it doesn't like, it has in a stadium it rocks, but like just playing that on a guitar, it doesn't have the like kick you in the wherever's kind of whatever.
Well, so that's exactly what happened in the documentary, right? When Edge was was playing I Will Follow, and that guitar line by itself without the effects and everything is nothing special, and that's part of what makes Edge's guitar playing unique, and that's also what he gets a lot of criticism for, is that Edge is not a shredder by instinct. He can shred, but he doesn't want to. And so when you're in a room with two other guys who all they want to do is shred, Edge kind of stands out for the wrong reasons. But to criticize Edge for not shredding is to do his brand of guitar playing a disservice, because he doesn't focus on that. He focuses on everything else but the light speed technique. So he focuses on timbre and texture and timing, and Edge is as much a rhythm guitar player as he's a lead guitar player, which is exceptionally rare in rock.
Yeah, he's definitely got that, like he has the bigger picture, I think, of the song as more important than the riff, whereas those guys are from the get a good riff and then build a song around that, which that's where a song like Get on Your Boots or Vertigo is much more like a riff driven song, which makes it unique with U2, obviously, in terms of their song library and style of writing and stuff like that. But I before I forget, we need to throw in some of the other folks here who sent in audio. So we'll go with Collin here first, just in the order they came, and listen to his thoughts on No Line.
Happy birthday, No Line on the Horizon. This album is very important to me because my U2 fandom had sort of waned during the Vertigo tour and the 18 singles thing. I had grown kind of bored with the musical direction they were going in. They had done a Back to Basics album with All That You Can't Leave Behind, which was very good, but it seemed like they wanted to stay basic, and that just wasn't sitting well with me. I like the experimental, weird side of U2 the most. And No Line on the Horizon was a return to form for me. So I really needed this album to be really good if I was going to keep being a diehard U2 fan. And also I was going through a lot of personal stuff during the Vertigo tour and all that made it hard for me to be a U2 fan. And I won't go into details, but there's definitely a personal component to that is important. So whenever I hear Bono singing in the song No Line on the Horizon, the songs in your head are now on my mind. You put me on pause. I'm trying to rewind, reload, and replay. I feel like he's singing that to me, and of course he's not, but to me that lyric means the songs that you want us to do are the songs that now I want us to do, the kind of music I want to make, and we're going to do that for this album and maybe the next one too. And so strap yourself in and enjoy, which I do very much so. Not so much the middle part of the album, the I'll Go Crazy, Get on Your Boots, and stand-up comedy. I think that's where the album kind of sags, so it's not a perfect record, but the first 4 songs and the last 4 songs on this album are the really important songs that win me over and or won me over, and I think they still sound fresh today in large part because they don't perform any of these songs live anymore. So it's the one U2 album, one of the few U2 albums where you can put on and just it sounds fresh every time. You're not really comparing the live versions too much. I'm a big fan of this album, and I'm excited to hear you guys talk about it. So thank you. Bye.
I hope we do it justice, Collin. But that's an interesting point he raised right there at the end of how they don't play it live, and so it does sound fresh, which is totally, and that even the fact that the only tour where they should have played it a lot live, they didn't really play it a lot, and so there isn't a lot of familiarity with it the way that obviously, even not like Streets obviously, but even other stuff that we've heard so much of, and you kind of, the album almost sounds like a downer compared to the live version. Here we don't have that reference point, which is kind of brilliant take on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you go to the early shows, which luckily I was able to see in Europe, vastly different after they dropped some songs out of this set. So I would say within the first 10 shows, maybe 9 shows, I heard them play No Line on the Horizon and Unknown Caller, which were very interesting to hear live. I was happy they played them, but they weren't the most exciting songs in a live set. I think Unknown Caller was pretty fun. I was trying to find my version of the video, which I recorded solely for Edge's solo. It's on one of my old phones and another computer. And I just didn't have a chance to pull it up. And I love his solo at the end. It's very melodic. It's very nice, before they kind of go into the end. And the band did a nice job. Bono did of sort of leading the crowd through that. And so I liked it live, but I do think I can see why they moved some of them. I think the biggest surprise was the remix on Crazy. And I mean, honestly, let's get real. That saved the song. I like it on the album, but when they played it live, it was game over. It was a whole new version of the song. And Larry out there, come on, we love that too. We love Larry. And it was fun. So I think, people went nuts over that part. They went crazy.
The set lists for the European part, 2009, and even getting into 2010, because even 2010 they started playing songs that haven't yet been released. North Star, I'm thinking of Every Breaking Wave, obviously eventually came through as well. But they really were very very experimental in that respect, with wanting to do something, a little bit different. And there are lots of songs on that tour never been played live before, or hadn't been played live for a long, long time. Like, hearing Scarlet, hearing The Unforgettable Fire, whatever, they're talking about songs of Experience tour, having playing rarities and whatever, but nothing by comparison to the 360 tour. That was a real deep cut tour in that respect. And it's only really, I think, around 2011 when they did that final leg of North America. Yeah, by then the album is out of sight, out of mind, even for U2 fans in some respects, because it's more than 2 years old. So the whole tour originally was going to be called, I think it was called Get On Your Boots Tour, wasn't it, or something like that, or Let Me In This. Might be Let Me In the Sound Tour. I can't remember.
Oh, Let Me.
That's the title of my upcoming book.
Which one?
The title of my upcoming book, Let Me In the Sound, the sonic signature of U2.
Chris's
That's
plug.
the book I'm working on. It's coming.
Yeah. But even that got dropped, really. So the whole 360 tour. Usually you see an album getting toured. At that point, really, the tour really was the tour of the stage, wasn't it? Ultimately, in 2011, it was completely different. Yeah.
Well, and circling back around to the news we talked about at the beginning, I think if at u2.com/tours, which is a great place to go to find out about U2 tours,
it certainly
is correct, then, and I'm reading it correctly, which is maybe more of the issue, is this is the last tour they were in Australasia, like Australia, New Zealand.
Yes.
Got visited.
Oceania.
by the band. And so it's an interesting kind of timeline to all kind of be circling back to at this point. Let's jump to maybe hearing what speaking of jumping, let's go to across the pond to Kenny and his Scottish lilt.
Okay, some musings from Scotland around about No Line. No Line for me is a bit of a complete contradiction. Love the album cover. That kind of almost, if you gaze at it too long, it kind of sucks you in. In terms of album content, some really great U2 tracks on there. No Line, magnificent. Possibly you could argue moments as well. Some very strange offerings as well. Boots, Unknown Caller, White as Snow even kind of feels a bit strange in there. And, well, Crazy, the poppy version of, really doesn't do anything for me. But it's an album that intrigues me, bemuses me, captivates me, and sometimes actually frustrates me. However, live, some of the great U2 songs didn't come off, No Line, and possibly even Magnificent. And yet others that I was really struggling with, like Boots and Crazy, well, actually, they really worked for me. So an album that's kind of all over the place in terms of recording and or live versions. However, some fantastic songs and great memories I associate with it, even with the 360 tour, albeit by the time 360 finished, there was very little No Line left to be seen.
Yeah. Yeah, similar vibes, obviously, and I just noticed as well one tweet that came in that U2 Ginger said, "Fave track was Moment of Surrender and Breathe. This album has so much meaning for me. It was my inspiration when I was making some major life changes, and the tour was so good." So it's kind of interesting how that sort of reoccurring theme of like you guys have both alluded to, like sort of life changes happen. Like, I don't know if it's just a 10-year, a decade is like the sort of perfect time to look back on, or legitimately that, time period in a lot of people's lives was, in a bit of upheaval and things like that. But at any rate, there's obviously a lot of synergy there. So,
well, that was also around the time of the global financial crisis, right? Right. So a lot of a lot of people were feeling a lot of the same things. And I love what Kenny said, that he was frustrated, he was confounded, he loved parts of it, he didn't love parts of it. I'm like, it's typical U2, it's, you love him, you hate him, you like some of it, you don't like some of it. I mean, it runs the gamut. So it's, in that way, it's the perfect U2 album.
Yeah. You heard it here first. You have to buy his book to find out the rest.
I think, do y'all remember, I want to kind of go back to the tour for a second, when we were all like waiting with bated breath, of course, like we do, for tour news and, hey, what's it going to look like? And Bono had said, hey, we're going to go back to an outdoor tour. It's going to be a stadium tour. The first one they'd done since, was it outdoor? Pop. Yeah.
Pop, yeah.
Yeah. And, so the excitement began to build, and then we started seeing pictures of the legs that were being built in Belgium, the claw legs. Everybody's like, oh my gosh. And then when you saw that thing in its entirety, it's like mind-blowing. I still think it's one of the coolest stages I have ever seen. And then they built it into the whole space theme and Space Oddity and, talking to the space station. I think, to me, just the whole themes that started to build around that was really cool. But what it did, again, is U2 set the bar even higher on building tour stages that blow everyone else away. They're always at the forefront of doing what's new, right, and what's next in terms of technology. And they invest the money in it. They invest the time. They put the people on it. And the Claw did that. And I sat... when I went to Dublin, I don't know where I was in Croke Park, but I was definitely on the upper deck, although it was in a front row, so that was kind of cool. And I was on Edge's side. Yeah, so that was super cool, and I could see, but I was looking right at the screen. So, you don't feel like you're missing anything. Once again, they brought it to the audience. And I think that, they've stated many times, they strive to bring the people to them, make them feel like they're part of it. Instead of being little bitty ants, way over there, you could see them. And they did it again with this tour. And I don't know, that's just my feeling on it. And then, but it reinvented it. They were able to reinvent it, when they got to 2011, for the Achtung Baby stuff. I think I was in Chicago for that one, and I was pretty blown away by that, and how good it sounded. Let's not forget how good it sounded, because usually in a stadium you expect junky sound, right? Theirs was not. They maybe Christopher or Aaron, y'all can talk about this, but the speakers that they used in the system and the spacing made it sound really good. I thought outdoors. I was surprised.
The technology on the 360 tour really, I mean, it took, I think it took the concert experience, not just for U2, but the overall rock and pop music concert experience to another level. I mean, first of all, you had the size of the stage. It was the tallest stage ever. And then, you know, it was the biggest stage. Plus, in terms of sound, all of the speakers were up. They were not on the floor. So the stage was completely free. It had those two moving walkways, you know, where Edge and Bono could do their little interplay. So technologically, that tour, you know, I mean, and U2's always been at the forefront of tech, and the 360 tour, regardless of what you think about the songs on it, was a revolutionary tour from just a production standpoint. I mean, that 360-degree screen too, that expanded, holy moly! I mean,
it. Up and down.
Yeah, and then they sang Zeropa and Unforgettable Fire from inside the screen. I mean, what? Who does that?
I mean, to be honest with you, that whole stage show is 10 years on now. You think about it. At the time, it was from the future, and it still is from the future.
And that's what they wanted, right?
And she needs a big kiss. There it is.
Yes, and I live in Houston, Texas, so I saw them here, of course, and they played Your Blue Room. And of course, they had gone to visit NASA down here, so they were really into the whole space theme on that show. But when they played Your Blue Room, I was probably one of like 20 people in the audience who really got it. Okay, maybe 100. A lot of people were doing beer breaks and bathroom breaks, but I was just so happy to talk about a deep cut. Aaron,
did Adam do his talking through that one? You know, the end. Did he do that?
I can't. I'm trying to remember.
I'm gonna have to listen to a
I would remember if he did. We'll have to go find the video.
I feel like he didn't,
it,
or they dubbed it. Is my
think
recollection, but that I don't think he did it live. But that would be so sweet. Just like spotlight, everything goes dark. Adam just steps up to the mic and starts.
It made me feel incredibly jealous there.
Like Becky needs a song.
Yeah, seriously.
It was good enough, but that would have been better. And they brought out Space Baby. You know, I call him Space Baby. You know, I mean, all the iconography was they were starting to bring out from the AB era and Zeropa. Like, you know, and we should talk about how this compares to some of that sound, the Zeropa, right? There's a lot of some talk about that. There was at the time, right? You're talking about the influences.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, this No Line is an experimental record, and you know, I think of it like a concept album. It's you know, so and that's exactly what Zeropa was. Zeropa for me was, you know, I mean, because it took U2's sound that they started on Achtung Baby, but then I mean, really ran with it, right? And what made I think what made No Line not sit well with a lot of people was just how different it sounded from Atomic Bomb, and I don't think fans were expecting a transitional album at that point.
Right.
You know, I think maybe fans were expecting more of a rock album, and then a transition after No Line. But No Line was the transition, and you know, so we tend to pair All That You Can't Leave Behind and Atomic Bomb together as U2's renaissance for the 2000s, and then all of a sudden, No Line comes and says, all right, everything we did on Atomic Bomb, forget it. And, you know, for us diehards, you know, we attach ourselves so strongly to an album. And when they do something radical like that, it often takes us a long time to adjust.
Which we should have been anticipating. Like the sort of trilogy aspect of U2 has often been talked about Achtung Baby, Zeropa, and Pop. And then All That You Can't Leave Behind, just Atomic Bomb, and then obviously something even more kind of weird experimental should be coming, which, you know, in anticipation of whatever's coming next, you would think maybe will happen again, but we'll see. I don't think the band follows that progression that literally, but it kind of just has happened the last two cycles, I guess, or whatever you want to call it, a collection of albums. So I guess just fans, prepare yourself for whatever Songs of Ascent or whatever the next thing is that comes. But don't freak out. But
well, they were talking about Songs of Ascent while they were making this album. There's a photo.
Yes,
in the box
yes,
set.
They were.
I went back through the book and it's on there. Like they have a whiteboard that they must have put up when they were recording in Morocco, it looked like. And it says Songs of Ascent, a couple of other things, and then Thankful for the Day, which I thought was kind of cool. But yeah, they've been talking about that for so long, as we know. Who knows if that'll ever show up?
We'll see. Maybe Rick Rubin's working on it. We're going to get to Mason's comments here in a second, but just before, you want to read off some of the other folks who sent in tweets and stuff, which you can do, by the way, if you send use hashtag #AskAtU2 on Twitter. You can send a comment in, and it'll automatically put it in our show notes here, and we can talk about it on the show. But at Cashmaster Omega said, the most underrated album, the only U2 album that means more to me personally, is Achtung Baby. First 4 songs are among the best of their career. 360 Tour was awesome. Wish they'd play some of it again in the future. At Care Dubois, I think is how you said it, said, I have nice and not so nice things to say about this album, but that's less important than this. When it came out 10 years ago, I had a nasty head cold that stuck around for almost 3 weeks, and coincidentally, that happened at the same time this year, and I never get sick. So, who knows what that means?
Oh, no.
Where are we here? At Hallie Toller said, a fave is magnificent. Love the guitar solo and unknown caller. And Fiona Duffield said, love Cedars of Lebanon, which I think is a vastly underrated song too that should get heard more. He likes pop, some great songs, but some great songs, but not a great album. Sorry, let me try this again. Like pop, some great songs, some not great songs, and an album with more work could have been really special. At Crony 2 said, could have been a classic with Joshua Tree and Achtung Baby, but those middle 3 chart wannabe hits are brutal and embarrassing. U2 once again.
Man, no love for those middle rockers. Yikes!
A lot of people don't like them. Yeah.
They said U2 once again compromised their quality by seeking popularity, which is always funny to me. I think they do want to write a hit song, but I don't know that they're like listening to the radio and then trying to how can we engineer a hit here? But that's another discussion. It's when they go deep within themselves is when they find the gold, strangely cold sounding. And just a couple others at DSTBK said Moment of Surrender is unreal, and at 40 Dancing Bear, Breathe was their favorite track. So let's jump to Mason now and see what he had to say.
Hey there, everybody. This is Mason Meritt, your New York City correspondent. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in and talk a little bit about No Line on the Horizon. Possibly, and by possibly I mean absolutely, the most important U2 album for me. It came out when I was 14 years old, and the Get On Your Boots music video was what got me into the band and made me pay attention to them for the first time. Now that it's 10 years later, it's fascinating to see how this has stood out as something that reflects a bunch of different eras of U2, but not much more than that. It's sort of the last time that they made an album without a huge, cohesive biographical theme to it. And I think because of that, it's one of their most thematically interesting to dive into, and musically, it's all over the place in the best possible way. It's got my favorite song ever on it, U2 song at least, Moment of Surrender, and it has stand-up comedy. Take that how you will. And to answer one of Chris's questions he posed in the Slack channel, my boots are on. I've had them on for years. My feet are chafing. I can't feel my right pinky toe, but they're on. I'm dedicated. Thanks, guys.
That's good. But that man
Mason.
he has impeccable taste, I have to say.
We love you, Mason.
Interesting, he brings up the thematic themes, and we haven't discussed that. But this album is very unique from Bono's perspective because it's predominantly, he always sings from an I perspective, from the first person. This is an album which is predominantly third person.
Third person, yes.
Songs
Absolutely.
and lyrics. Nearly every track is a third person lyric. Yeah. And in fact, I had written about Cedars of Lebanon on the review of the songs that we put on U2.com. And if you look at those lyrics, they're not lyrics, they're a poem that he's sung to a melody. There's no 2 ways about it. And that applies to nearly every single track on the album. Yeah. So, you mentioned earlier, Chris, about being a concept album. It's probably the biggest concept album out there. It's prog rock, as far as I'm concerned. It really is.
Prog rock done U2 style, which is
right.
Yeah, and the speaking of thematically, that's that I was thinking about the themes of the songs when I was trying to come up with a different track order. And I was actually just making it now on Apple Music. I'll publish it after that. But there's also a ton of imagery on this album.
Yes.
I mean, you know, the title alone and the cover image, right? And that vision of having no horizon. Yeah, exactly, right. And then just it's an album that lives kind of outside itself almost because of the third person tone and all of the external references. Plus, you know, part of it was recorded outside of where they normally record, right? So there's a feeling of the other that is very present on this album for me.
Yeah, most certainly.
All right.
Everybody had
the other aspect as well, just something to mention as well, is that it does get on my nerves a little bit about, you know, U2's this album is not commercially, you know, big flop, blah blah blah. It sold nearly 6 million copies in 2009 alone. You know, it's nearly up there to 6 million. It was the 7th best-selling album of 2009. It made number one in 26 countries. No other U2 album has had as many number ones in all these different countries. You know, it's not a flop.
Well, you know, I mean, relative to Joshua Tree's 13 million, you know, I mean,
in proportion to the time, you know, his experience has done 1.3 million. You know, in best part of 18 months. So, you know, it's all relative, isn't it?
It sure is. Perspective is a crazy thing.
Yeah, and it's still
good to know.
Either by actual gross or gross adjusted for inflation, their 360 tour is still the highest grossing tour of all time.
Yeah.
So
20 million or something like that. I mean, gross. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, remember it went on for 2 years and it was in stadiums, but
also
still they sold them out. I think every show, pretty much.
And weren't they the first to live stream an entire concert on YouTube?
Yeah.
Because they live streamed from the Rose Bowl.
Yeah.
October.
That was eventually the official release, wasn't it? Official release DVD.
Yeah.
Of the tour. Yeah.
Which turned out really well.
To tell you, that's the only one live release that they've offered in the last number of tours that I haven't bought.
Yeah, actually, me too.
I
don't have.
I didn't. I mean, I watched it like when they were streaming it, and I was like, yeah, but I never bought it. I have a bunch of other stuff, but I just was like kind of done with it. I don't know why. I don't know.
It is like the dollars don't obviously tell how good something is necessarily, but it's just an interesting discussion because the tour, you know, Becky, you brought up the idea of how long it went, but actually they had 110 shows, which among the top 10 tours grossing all time is like almost the lowest number of shows per. So you can say like the price per ticket and obviously how many people they fit in the show, all that kind of stuff was amongst the highest. The average attendance per show was 66,000 people. So you get, you know, compared to let's just pick one here. Ed Sheeran's tour, the Plus or Divide tour, whatever that one was, 31,000 people per show. So like you're doubling the amount of people in the stadium or in the room, right? So obviously you can make a lot more money doing that.
Yeah, I mean, there were 110,000 people at the Rose Bowl show. I mean, literally a sea of people.
Yeah.
I know.
I can't even begin to imagine that.
Well, and I think in Dublin there were around 80. Was it closer to 80? Because they filled the pitch. Aaron, you were probably at some of those. I don't.
Yeah. I mean, and even Croke Park. You see, you have Hill 16 up at Croke Park. You can't push they couldn't put the claw all the way back. But
that's right. Yeah.
It's a huge stadium. It's the 4th largest stadium in Europe is Croke Park.
It's enormous.
But you know what? Didn't the show, wasn't it completely different as well? Because no matter where you were, you could see from a different perspective, and the atmosphere was so completely different as well.
It was electric.
For the first time, you're at a show outdoors, and you're looking through the stage, but you can see the fans behind reacting the way that you're reacting. And it's just a completely unique experience from a concert perspective that I had never experienced before. And I've been doing 30 years worth of concerts by that point. So, you know, for 20 years probably. No, 30, yeah. I'm getting old. You know, it's so completely unique in that perspective from a fans and from somebody who's attending a concert. It was so overwhelming, you know, as much as to be honest with you, as Zoo TV was. Really was.
Right. Well, you know, and
TV was cool.
And for a band as big as U2, first of all, and then to do it in a stadium, but to have a theater in the round feel. So to have, you know, it was, you're with 80,000 people, but everyone has a really good view, which you never get that in a stadium, and everyone can hear it really, really well because the sound was really good for a stadium show.
Right. So, because they wanted you to feel like you were right there. And
exactly.
They did.
And that was the magic of, or that was part of the magic of that tour, was no matter where you were in that stadium, you felt like you were really close to the stage. And I have fond memories of that tour because that was the first time that I did GA, and I waited all day, and I got in the inner circle and I got to hear my favorite songs from the inner circle. And I mean, that was an amazing experience. Like, to hear Streets and to be one of those people doing that. I wanted to do that, and I did that, and it was awesome. And I got to cross that off of my bucket list. So
every U2 fan should have at least one of those. I agree.
Right? Yeah, totally.
Yeah, that'd be
oh my gosh.
Future discussion, future topic of discussion for the show is YouTube bucket list items and what's remaining and what's next for various folks.
That was an amazing tour, just all the way around. Yeah.
Agreed. All right. Well, I think that's a great point to end. The moment of No Ender was the name of our episode last time we talked about this album. So I think there's some complaints about the tour ending song, maybe from some folks at U2 who should go unnamed. But anyways, we'll end it now before people get too annoyed with us going on and on and on. But maybe you have follow-up questions, maybe you have comments that we didn't discuss, things we didn't cover that you think we missed, and we'd love to hear about them. If you tweet at U2, it's twitter.com/ATU2, and you can use hashtag AskAtU2. That'll get you right into the show notes for the episodes to come. We're on a little bit of a, just like U2, kind of like a break, and when we're inspired, we'll put something out, almost like, if there's a concert we want to go to or play at, kind of like U2, we'll gather the band back together. But obviously, once U2 gears up with more stuff, whenever that happens, we'll also gear up with more episodes. So keep us subscribed in your podcast player, and of course watch Twitter and the website at u2.com for details on future recordings and future episodes. Let's go around here and just where can folks find you on the internet if they disagree or strongly agree or just want to give you a high five with a U2 360 memory. Becky, starting with you, where can folks reach out?
At B Myers on Twitter.
Right, and Aaron?
I'm at Ivanobe, Ivanobe.
And Christopher?
On Twitter.
Christopher, how about you?
And I am on Twitter as well at CJSEndrinal, so CJSEndrinal on Twitter and Instagram.
Awesome. And like I said, twitter.com/ATU2, facebook.com/ATU2com, instagram.com/ATU2com. There's still content coming out, still stuff to read, and especially if you're a U2 fan, if maybe the podcast is somehow the only way you're connecting with the site, be sure to check us out on any of the other social platforms you happen to frequent. And like I said, we'll find or get Christopher's link to his new album sorting on Apple Music, and someone wants to do it on Spotify accordingly as well. You can tweet at me. I'm iChris on Twitter. Send me a link and I'll add it to the show notes for future viewers, listeners of the show. And if you have a second to leave us a rating or a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you happen to listen to podcasts, that definitely helps get the word out about the show as a fun show to listen to for U2 fans. So thank you for listening. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.